All right, Google Nexus 5. This is going to be an honest review of this device, this brand new flagship phone from Google and LG. I've had the phone for about a week now. I'm going to talk a little bit about my thoughts, my likes, my dislikes. If you're an Android fanboy, this is not the channel for you because you're going to hear some pretty harsh criticisms of this phone. If you're an open-minded person and you want an honest review of this device, keep watching and you'll enjoy this video. All right, so we're going to start talking about this, this phone, and just mostly about the hardware and the build quality and my thoughts about that. This is a 16 gig white version. The back is plastic, and it's a fairly good design in my opinion. I think compared to the Nexus 4, which had a glass back, which when you dropped it, it broke, this is probably a better build. It doesn't feel cheap like a Samsung phone. It doesn't have that sort of thin plastic sort of junky feeling like the Galaxy S4 has. It's definitely more solid. Certainly not as solid as an iPhone 5C. I think the iPhone 5C is a better plastic design. This is pretty nice though. It does feel smooth to the touch. It has a solid feeling to it. It's not creaky like the Galaxy series. This camera inlay in the back is sort of odd. I don't know why it's so big. Maybe they just chose to design it that way. But it definitely stands out, definitely lends some character to the phone. Getting around to the sides, everything is really smooth on the sides and on the front of this phone. It's sort of blocky and square feeling. I don't really like the blocky and squareness. I think they could have done a little bit better maybe with that design. I mean, it's okay, it feels okay in your hand, but I have sort of small hands, and so for me the phone feels big, and I don't like the fact that it's kind of, not square, but rectangular, and it's wide and it's tall, and you know, if you look at an iPhone 5S, you know, which is also very rectangular and very sort of square and solid feeling, it's different because it's narrower, and so it's sort of easier to hold than this wider Nexus 5, but that's just a comparison here between these two guys. Getting away from the sort of overall shape, we can talk more about things that you see on the phone. They have this weird white speaker inset, which I don't really dislike. I don't agree with that. I kind of think that's sort of out of place. Front-facing camera, flash rear camera. We have some speaker ports on the bottom here, which are sort of nicely drilled into the plastic, and then your micro USB there. Rockers for the volume on the left side, power button on the right side. They're sort of towards, the power button is really far towards the top. I don't know if you can see that in the light, but it's right there. And so it doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't line up like the HTC, or sorry, not HTC, but Samsung has it down here, and it makes a little bit more sense because otherwise you have to sort of reach a little bit to grab the power button, and I don't know, it feels out of place. Volume feels fine. So that's talking about the design of the phone. I think in terms of weight, it feels good. I don't know the spec on the grams. It's kind of close to this weight of the iPhone 5S. It's solid. It doesn't feel too light. It doesn't feel too heavy. I think weight-wise, they've done a good job keeping where the plastic keeps the weight down, and still feels solid, but doesn't feel heavy or light or cheap. So let's jump into the screen and the software and all the other good parts of this phone. This is running Android 4.4 KitKat, which is the latest version of Android, which is nice. It's nice to be on Google's platform and have a phone directly from Google where you know you're going to get the latest software. Companies like HTC and Samsung and Motorola don't have the latest software on their devices. Even the Moto X doesn't have the latest version of Android, and that was, Motorola's now owned by Google, and so they've sort of created a Google-specific phone too, but they're lacking behind in the software. So it's nice to have Android 4.4 in here. It's definitely different than what you've seen in other builds of Jelly Bean, or in Jelly Bean, I guess. The icons are a lot bigger. They stand out more. They jump out more. The fonts look different. It's very, very smooth. There is, I can honestly say this is one of the first Android phones, Nexus 4 was good too, without any really hint of lag. There's still some keyboard lag in some of the applications on this phone, which does sort of drive me insane. If you want a phone without keyboard lag, look to either an iPhone or to a Windows phone. But keyboard lag, it's troublesome and it's annoying, but it's not nearly as bad as application lag and software lag within the operating system that you see terribly in phones like the Galaxy S4 and even some of the lower end Android phones. But again, very, very smooth. Applications launch fast. Everything runs really, really nicely. There's not a hint of any sort of slowdowns or trouble or crashes. I mean, it's just a great phone. Everything works well. Everything is smooth. Everything is easy. You know, it's definitely a refinement of Android. This is probably the nicest sort of build of Android yet, in my opinion. I think they did a really good job sort of integrating Google Now into the operating system. You can just sort of swipe over and you have some information here. Google Now is also integrated into the OS, and so you can say, okay Google Now, and it picks up your voice and it will hear me talk, and you can have some speech recognition there. The only bad thing about this Google Now, a sort of OK Google Now hands-free, is that you can't cancel it, right? So cancel, go away, stop. Which is troublesome a little bit, because if you are trying to do something hands-free and you don't want to touch the phone, you have to then touch the phone to cancel Google Now anyway. So I don't know, that's a little bit of an annoyance, but not terrible. You know, you can get around it just by hitting cancel or touching the phone. So moving away from the operating system, let's talk just about sort of the screen. This is a 5-inch screen. It's, you know, full high resolution, 1080p, blah, blah, blah. Lots of pixels. Again, I don't like to talk about specs in my review. I like to talk about how the phone looks, feels, and operates in your hand, because ultimately that's what matters. If people have a good experience with the phone, and if they like the screen, and if they like what they see, they're going to like it. If they don't like it, they're not going to like it. It doesn't matter how many pixels it has or whatever, however many, you know, retina display or 1080p, blah, blah, blah. So how does this phone look? Well, they've done a very, very good job with the screen. I think it's far better than the Nexus 4 was. I was really, really, really disappointed with the Nexus 4 screen quality. The resolution of the Nexus 4 was good, but they just totally screwed up the color accuracy on that phone. It just was lacking contrast. It wasn't calibrated properly. They've done a great job on this phone, you know, but it's still not as good as it could be. If you were to look at this phone compared to an HTC One, or if we compare it to an iPhone 5S, you'll quickly see that it's lacking contrast. You'll quickly see that it's lacking color detail. It's lacking accuracy. It looks a little bit washed out. I mean, you can see it. I don't know if you guys can see it on the video, but if you look at this photo, the greens, the blacks, the reds, I mean, it's just, the iPhone is sharper, sharper's not the word. The iPhone is just a nicer looking display. It just has a little bit more contrast. The colors pop a little bit more. It's an overall more pleasing image on the iPhone 5S than it is on the Nexus 5. And that goes to show you that I think maybe as development sort of increases for this phone, we'll have some kernels, you know, that we can flash that'll change the color calibration, might make it a little bit better. But if you're trying to compare this phone to an iPhone 5, 5S, or Galaxy, you know, they all use different screen technologies. We're not going to talk about AMOLED versus LCD, etc. We're going to more focus on how things look. And so I think if we were to just talk about the N5, I would really say that it's a great display. I think many people will like it. I think that if you look at it and use it, you'll like it, but it probably isn't as good as some of the other phones. So one of the other big concerns from a lot of people out there looking to buy this phone is battery life. I know there were a lot of complaints about battery life on the N4. Now, if you look at my battery stats here, just from a sort of average day of use, you'll see that I got 12 hours and 8 minutes on battery, and that was down to 4%. Most of that, the majority of that, 41%, was the screen being on, along with some you know, Android OS systems and some of the internal services of Google. Again, this is average use for sort of a more business-oriented person. I don't watch a lot of videos. I don't play hardly any games. This is mostly email, texting, web surfing, Wi-Fi, etc. There's not a lot of gaming or videos associated with this, but for me, you know, I've used a lot of phones. I've used the S4, the HTC One, the iPhone 5, the iPhone 5S, Nexus 4, Nexus 5. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. This phone, I would call it average. I mean, I would get, you know, about a day's worth of use out of this phone. I would say it's similar to a lot of the other phones out there on the market. You know, charge it at night, you unplug it in the morning, you go to work, you have an average day. You need to plug this phone in by the time you get home from work. I wouldn't call it worse than anything. I wouldn't call it substantially better than anything on the market right now. I would call it average. Again, that's really, really vague, but if you want battery stats and an in-depth review of battery, look somewhere else. But for me, the phone definitely meets my needs for battery. I don't expect it to get 2 days of use out of it. I expect it to get 1 day of use out of it, and that's about what it gives me. Another concern that many people had was the camera and the quality of the camera in the new Nexus 5, and I'm also sort of bummed to report that the camera doesn't really stand up to my level of expectation. It's a decent camera, and it takes okay pictures, average pictures, maybe pictures that are similar to some of the lower to medium end Android phones out there. iPhone 5S definitely trumps the camera in the Nexus 5. Galaxy S4 definitely trumps the camera in the Nexus 5. you know, I'd call it acceptable. You know, if you're not super into photography and you just want something to take pictures, it's probably okay. It's probably good enough. But just know that there are better camera phones out there. I also don't really like this camera app. I think it's just clunky and slow and unresponsive and just annoying to use. I think that Google needs to redo their camera app and make it a little bit better and easier to use. I don't think it needs to be as complex and as detailed and as sort of silly as and gimmicky as the Samsung camera. I don't know, the camera in the HTC One is pretty good. The camera in the iPhone 5S is pretty good. I think, you know, there's room for improvement in the camera. I'm going to do a more in-depth review comparing camera phones as, you know, with the Nexus 5 and some of the other phones that are out there right now too, so stay tuned for that video. But as far as an overall opinion of the camera, it's decent. The quality is okay. Let's just look at a picture here I took just before. You know, it's probably something that most people would be okay with, but it's not something that I'm okay with because I do like photography, and I think that, like, this is just, it's just decent. You know, the resolution's not that great, the quality's not that great, it's, you know, marginal. And I've heard reports that Google is actually going to sort of improve the camera with the software, and maybe that will be the case or maybe not. But for right now, November 2013, the camera doesn't really meet my expectation. So I've talked a lot of smack about this phone, I've talked a lot of good about this phone too, and so where does that stand as far as what I think and whether I like it or not? You know, I would say, heck yes, I like this phone. I think it's a great phone for the money. I think that's probably the strongest feature of the Nexus line in general, is that you're getting a solid device for not a lot of money. This phone, 16 gig white, was $350, unlocked, direct from Google. You can't beat that price. It has LTE, it has the latest and greatest software from Google, it has awesome hardware, you know, the build is great, the screen is great, it has so much going for it that you can't pass up this price. The only way you would be able to pass up the price is if you're stuck buying things on contract and stuck paying the upgrade fee, which a lot of people in the United States are. Worldwide, I'm not sure how this phone compares worldwide in price, but in the USA, if you're into buying unlocked phones like I am, this is a steal. This is an awesome, awesome phone. I mean, probably the best Android phone out there right now for the price. It's just well built, it feels great, it's got the latest software, it has an awesome screen, just great overall feel in your hand. I can't say enough good things about this camera. Sure, there's bad things about it. Sure, there's some negative sides to it. You know, sure, it's maybe not the top of the line greatest thing ever phone, you know, but it's still a really, really great phone, especially for the money. This is definitely going to be my next phone, or is my next phone, that I'm going to keep in my pocket and carry around for certainly the next few months. I really, really like this phone. I think they've done a really good job. I think it's a real winner. I think people will like it. I think it's going to sell really well. Hopefully it pushes people more into the unlock field, or at least gets them thinking about purchasing unlocked devices to get away from the carriers and get away from the nonsense associated with upgrades and price and all this BS that the carriers hold over us. So if you're in the market for a new phone, consider the Nexus 5. I think it's a great device. Hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe. Thanks.